I can do that. Yeah, where am I sitting this time? Totally. Okay, so the second meeting of the Citizen Budget Committee is starting, and call it to order and start with a land acknowledgement. No? To me?
Whoever you want.
Please, I guess.
I can do that.
I don't. This is embarrassing. Sorry, guys. I do not have it memorized. Thank you. Oh, do you have it printed? Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it
I
up
will
here.
take this time to say if anybody wants to speak at the public forum, please turn in your sheet to that basket up at the front very, very soon to be able to hit the spot on the agenda.
Okay, I'm ready. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right, we acknowledge and honor the Aboriginal people on whose ancestral homelands we work, the Irukutsim band of the Shasta Nation, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. We honor the first stewards in the Rogue Valley and the lands we love and depend on. Tribes with ancestral lands in and surrounding the geography of the Ashland watershed include the original, past, present, and future indigenous inhabitants of the Shasta, Takelma, and Athabascan people. We also recognize and acknowledge the Shasta village of Quakakan, where the crow lights that is now the Ashland City Plaza.
Thank you. You did that so well. Yeah. And now let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a roll call.
I can do roll call.
Thank you.
Mayor Graham?
Here.
Hanson? Duquesne? Bloom?
Here.
Dale?
Here.
Kaplan?
Here.
Hunter?
Here.
Adams?
Here.
Roy?
Here.
Fredericks? Murray?
Here.
Spiegler?
Here.
Wade? Okay.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Let's go through the approval of the May 25th, 2023 minutes. Yes, Linda?
I move to approve the minutes of the Citizens Budget Committee of May 25th, 2023.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Jeff seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that would have been the April, not May. I think it's a mistype.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
That was my question.
Oh, I think it is.
I'll withdraw my
the
motion.
minutes of the future. Yeah, so maybe if we could do that over again.
I'll
Apologies.
withdraw my motion.
Second that.
All right.
I move for approval of the April 25th, 2023 minutes of the Citizens Budget Committee of the City of Ashland.
I'll second that one.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. And now we are on to the public forum. I am going to call a couple people up at a time. Please line up behind, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. There's a cool like stoplight feature, I guess, now, where it goes green, you can talk, yellow, you have about 20 seconds left, and then red is sort of getting towards the end of your time. When the chimer rings, please finish your sentence, and that's it, I guess. So I'm going to call the first couple people up. Nancy Seward, Kelly Jean Hammond, and Paul Mozina. Please come up, and when you begin talking, please state your name and the city in which you live, and then go for it. Yeah, I don't know if that's on. Yeah. All good. We'll give you your time back.
Okay, my name is Nancy Seward. I live in Ashland. And I think all of you may be aware that about a month ago, the funds
Just speak right into the mic.
It's not working.
Yeah, there's something going on with
Yeah.
that.
Doesn't matter, I'll just speak up. So anyhow, the regional administration funds for Head Start were cut, and then they were about to shut down all the Head Starts in our area. And then that funding was secured and Head Start is happening. But it is very likely that in September, all of that money is gonna go away. And so, basically, we're on the precipice of funding Head Start. It's just a matter of time before the federal government takes that over. And the council has been very generous the past 2 years in providing funds to support families and children who are experiencing a difficulty paying for childcare. And if Head Start does shut down, we're going to be in a world of hurt in our community. And businesses are consequently going to be in a world of hurt, and the functioning of our community is going to be greatly impacted. And so I just would like to, again, put forth my concern for the fact that we're in a child care desert here in Jackson and Josephine County. And I know your needs are humongous for the budget to address, but I would really like to press upon you the need for continuing some sort of support for early childhood care for people in the community, because children will suffer, the families will suffer, and the businesses are going to suffer. I promise you that. And so whatever consideration, even if you cannot give the monies that you've given in the past, any help would be appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Jean Hammond.
Sorry, so the microphone's not working and we are broadcast, so we're gonna wanna have them come up and speak into the microphone so we can
Okay.
hear them, so we'll change the plans there.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly, and this is my daughter Dinah. The Ashland YMCA and Hellman Elementary campus have been important landmarks for my family for 2 generations, and I'm so proud that my daughter gets to attend the same schools I did when I was her age. My parents live across the street from Hellman, and they get so much joy in picking Dinah up from school every day. The YMCA Hellman Preschool is so much more than just a school. It is a cornerstone of our community. We are a proud blended family. I'm a recently remarried widow, raising my daughter and my stepdaughter on a tight family budget. My late husband's passing has led us to tighten our purse strings even more. Additionally, my stepdaughter was born at 27 weeks and is still overcoming many health challenges stemming from this. Even with insurance, the costs are astronomical. Our family loves living in Ashland, and our roots here grow deep, but it's not without challenges. The fiscal landscape in Ashland is rapidly changing, and with all the uncertainty in the world, access to education should not be a worry our children face. I see stories in the local and national news of budgets being granted for services that don't support families, and monies being revoked from groups that help families thrive. That isn't the Ashland I grew up in, and it's not the Ashland our next generation deserves. Ashlanders shouldn't be penalized for wanting to raise a family here. Both my children are enrolled in the summer session at preschool at the YMCA, one in Hellman and the other at Walker, and the scholarship program makes their participation possible. Without scholarship funds, the monthly cost of sending my 2 girls to preschool is almost equal to my monthly take-home pay. They deserve an education that doesn't put our family's finances in peril. We've been told that it takes a village to raise a family, and I'm lucky to have found my village here in Ashland with the YMCA in Hellman. Should my girls have to leave Ashland to find affordable preschool options, I worry about the opportunities they'd be robbed of. I also worry that Ashland would be a poorer place without their bright, generous spirits. Thank you for your time. To the Hellman and YMCA, thank you for helping shape my daughters into the intelligent, inquisitive young ladies they have become. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Mozima is up next. And then after that is Heidi Hill and Emily Truett.
Thank you. Thank you, Budget Committee and Mayor and Councilors for this opportunity. I'm concerned about the way that the the resolution that was passed by the council yesterday to impose a $3.50 increase on the public safety fee, and the reason for that increase is that we're told that the revenue being generated by the ambulance service now does not match what it previously generated. So we need to charge the citizens, we need to tax the citizens an extra $3.50 a month. So I sent a FOIA request to the budget director, and I know she's super busy, but I asked for what was the net position of the Ashland Fire and Rescue Ambulance Service for the years 2020 through 2023, because in the years 2015 through 2019, the ambulance service cost the city $840,000 a year. Cost. Okay, and now and we know that in 2025 they're projecting a 1.2 million contribution to the general fund from the ambulance service, 1.2 million after all expenses. So is that 1.2 million less than what the ambulance service used to generate in 2020 through 2023? And we can see EMS calls skyrocketed beginning of 2020. Non-emergency ambulance calls went way up from 2020. So we know that the ambulance service is very, very busy. So I'm asking, before you make any decisions about approving that resolution, and ask the budget director to produce the net position for the Ashland Fire Department's ambulance service for 2020 through 2023, because it lost money, $840,000 a year from 2015 to 2019, and in 2025 it's projected to earn 1.2 million. I'll be done one second. It's supposed to earn 1.2 million. So why are we deficient? The ambulance service is paying for itself. We're being told it's not, and that we need to pay an extra fee. So I hope you get the net position for the ambulance service. Thank you very much. I know I went over, and thanks for indulging me.
Heidi Hill.
Hi, I'm Heidi Hill, CEO of the Ashland Family YMCA, and I'm here to speak to you on behalf of the Child Care Affordability Grant. I first want to say I started my career in local government and spent 7 years working in the city manager's office and understand the innovative nature of cities investing in social services. However, I think that for Ashland, we face so many issues around the affordability. We see our schools suffering because families aren't able to live in this region because of the cost of housing, and we have an aging population that demands a commuter workforce. 80% of the people who live or work at the Ashland Family YMCA live outside of the region, White City, and even beyond. The Child Care Affordability Grant allows us to provide 40 slots of all-day workforce care 10 months of the year for over 50 hours a week. We provide more hours of care than any other child care facility. We have a full program that depends on multiple funding strands. Now, my board and our Ashland Y is fortunate to be in a position where we could invest in and support and build this program within 3 years. We have highly qualified full-time bilingual instructors. We offer meals and we offer swim lessons twice a year to the participants in our program. We rely on a variety of funding streams, and we rely on our own membership revenues and surplus to subsidize this program. The grant that we have received and the partnership that we have received from the city has meant more than just dollars in affordability. It has given my board and myself, frankly, the confidence in this community to stand up and provide for our families. So I hope you'll consider that this is a significant, meaningful program that is more than just childcare.
Thank you. Emily Truitt, and I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing that last name. And then after that is Carrie Pinnell and Stacia Stymack.
Hello, my name is Emily Trevette. I am here representing Ashland Youth Baseball, a 501c3 nonprofit sports program here in Ashland. For the past 14 years, we have provided an affordable way for our community children to continue playing baseball after Little League. We provide a vital service, creating a space for the kids to grow and develop their skills as they get ready for their high school baseball careers. We're able to do this by our board being made up of entirely volunteers, raising money through fundraisers, community donations, and grants. These past 14 years, we have been aided by Ashland Parks and Rec, as the school district does not provide any practice or game space for our baseball programs, and that includes our own high school team. As of 2025, Ashland Parks and Rec requires us to carry a $2 million bond and insurance policy in order for us to use their field at North Mountain Park. This is a substantial expense for our program as small as ours. This year, we only had one team comprised of 16 7th and 8th graders, which is below our anticipated forecast of 2 teams. Our current registration fee is $230 per player, and we are committed to providing scholarships to families facing financial hardship. If the field fee structure changes, our ability to provide these scholarships will be jeopardized, and we will be forced to raise the registration fee, resulting in yet more kids being unable to play a sport they love. While we understand that inflation is affecting everyone, including the operational costs of Parks and Rec, a shift from a flat, reasonable seasonal fee will leave us little choice but to pass on the increased monetary responsibility to our families paying the registration. Ashland is wondering where all our children are going, and I will tell you. They are leaving in droves due to lack of support of sports programs, whether it's because the school district is selling off our fields or our own Parks and Rec pricing out the youth sports in our city. Please read the room. These proposed price increases directly target our nonprofit youth sports programs, and this will result in losing more kids to different districts who clearly care more about money than children. Please reconsider your price increase format, because without our youth sports programs, we will have no one to charge. And where will that leave us? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Carrie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Carrie Pennell, and I'm the president of Ashland Little League. I've also coached. I have multiple children in baseball, softball, year-round. It's our life. And I'm here to sort of go on sort of what Emily was piggyback on what Emily was saying in regard to how an hourly fee will impact Ashland Little League versus like a set fee that we have paid over the years and what we would like to propose to continue to pay. So we understand that Parks and Rec needs a stabilized budget, and we feel as though that burden shouldn't fall on children, first off, and it shouldn't run on volunteer-run programs. We're not a business. Little League is a nonprofit organization that is meant to be accessibility to baseball and softball for children. And we are longstanding, community, minded. We've had a partnership on that field for, 50 years. And we understand that the process of a budget is very intensive and requires months of communication and work. And unfortunately, we weren't ever proposed like, hey, let's have a conversation. What would it look like if we did this, fee structure change? And so we've done the numbers, and under the $5 an hour field model that was sort of approved by the last week, it would increase all of the rates by about $20 per child. And that's just assuming that we're going to stay where we're at right now. It could decrease our attendance, it could increase it, so those numbers would have to vary greatly. And another reason why the hourly thing just doesn't really work for a nonprofit who uses the field 3 months a year. There's no one else using Hunter Park fields. It's just Ashland Little League. So we've proposed a $1,000 fee. Currently, we pay $250. Which is a large increase, and we understand that, they keep saying that, fields around are about similarly priced. However, we understand Phoenix Talent Little League pays about 25 cents to the City of Talent. Klamath Falls pays $1 to the railroad in Klamath Falls. And so we're proposing $1,000. Thank you.
And then next is Stasia. I'm probably mispronouncing that as well, sorry.
My name is Stacia Stymack. I serve on the Ashland Little League board. I coach t-ball, and I'm a parent of 2 young children. Parks and Recs gave us 3-day notice that a vote was happening to change our field rental structure fee. We showed up with little time to prepare because we really authentically and sincerely care. And we showed up, no time to prepare, we care, and despite several commissioners admitting during that meeting that they were unfamiliar with the conditions of the fields or how Little League operates, they still voted to pass the fee. In response, we rallied. We put together a field tour. They could see firsthand what goes on running this program, the hours of unpaid labor volunteers, like myself, like these ladies behind me, do to drag the fields, line, prep, clean, and maintain those fields. That's on top of coaching, umpiring, organizing games for 176 players, all to keep this program affordable for Ashland families. And yet, despite that effort, we still haven't seen any meaningful partnership or follow-up from Parks and Rec. No attempt to revisit the vote, no question about our operations, no engagement to work towards a solution together. So I have to ask, what is going on here? Help me, help us understand why a decision that directly impacts only one program, which is Ashland Little League, at Hunter Park was made with no collaboration, no consultation, and no transparency. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for a fair process and a flat, predictable fee that reflects the reality of how Little League works. But more than that, we're asking to be treated like partners in the community, not an afterthought. We are here, we've shown up, and we're asking you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That concludes the public forum section, and now we'll go on to the budget presentations.
Good afternoon, Budget Committee members. Mary Ann Berry, Finance Director, and we also have Bryn Morrison, Deputy Finance Director, and I've got Finance and Accounting Managers behind me in case you all have any questions around the budget. This is meeting number 2. Go ahead and proceed with the next slide. So a recap, the first meeting we had done budget presentations for our AFN, fiber network, enterprise, and we also did electric, public works divisions, fire, PD, and that video is up on the budget resources page for those who are just joining us now. We're going to be doing the rest of the general fund departments today. That's including ComDev, finance, information systems, and then all the administration divisions as well. So as you know here from this slide, City Manager Cotta had provided this summary last week. Our total biennial budget is balanced at $372.5 million, with the general fund at $100.2 million. We can go ahead. And again, our budget was based on council priorities that had been worked on the last several months. So we'll go ahead and proceed to the next slide since we've already covered this last week. And I am introducing now Director Goldman, who is the head of our Community Development and Planning Department.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Budget Committee. As mentioned, my name is Brandon Goldman, Community Development Director. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight the biennial budget for the Community Development Department. To start with, presented there is our organizational chart. 14 covered full-time employees. Wanted to note it's substantially unchanged from the previous biennium, with one subtle distinction that in the prior biennium, we had 2 senior planner positions and 1 associate planner. In this proposed budget, it changes to 1 senior planner and 2 associate planner positions. But again, the divisions remain unchanged. And in terms of looking at the divisions and the Community Development Department, it is comprised of the Building Safety Division, which is the portion of our department that implements the state building code, including permit review and issuance and associated inspections. The building department processed and permitted over 1,100 permits last year, including inspections associated with each of those applications. The planning division is actually divided into 2 sections, both the current planning division and the long-range planning division. The current planning division reviews current plant development applications for consistency with the land use code, and also the long-range planning portion develops new land use regulations for council consideration and review by the Planning Commission to implement either changes in state law or to address council goals. The housing division, for lack of a better term, an individual in our housing department, regulates the affordable housing units that are within the program. And those are deed-restricted housing units throughout the city of Ashland that the city requires be maintained as affordable housing. So that review includes income qualification for changes in tenancy. Additionally, the housing program manager oversees the city's social service grant program, the housing trust fund program, and is the administrator of the community development block grant program. And lastly, we have a code compliance personnel that addresses calls that come in for largely complaints around the community, fielded over 800 calls in the prior year. Those calls often are dealt with within our department, but in many cases they function to be the first point of contact for referrals to other departments or even outside agencies. So then as we move into the budget overview, I wanted to note that the budget again is substantially unchanged from the prior biennium. We did reduce professional services costs, and we do have a couple of enhancements to the budget, which I should have noted on the prior screen. If we can go back one, Bryn. So the enhancements to the budget include a significant change in terms of looking at an opportunity to spend $35,000 in professional service fees to pay for document digitization. It is not so much a change from last year. It was an enhancement in the prior biennium as well. But that is a program that allows us to remove a lot of the archive paper documents that we have to maintain for both building permit and planning actions in perpetuity, and digitize those so they're both readily available both for our staff as well as emergency service personnel. We are also looking at funding a software upgrade for the Intergov, which is our permitting software for both building permits and planning actions, and looking at having that be cloud hosted, which is an opportunity to reduce the ongoing maintenance costs for our IT department, but also remove to the cloud those essential documents that get stored in Intergov so that they are secured. And that is a one-time fee as well as an increase in ongoing hosting for the Intergov software. To note future projects, we do have a number of accomplishments that have happened over the prior year, namely in the long-range planning arena, such as the economic opportunity analysis is coming to a conclusion in short order. City Council reviewed a climate-friendly area land use ordinance amendment at their meeting last night, and that implements some statewide planning goals. Both of those were substantive efforts that were funded by the Department of Land Conservation and Development through grant opportunities. So we will continue to seek grants whenever there is a state mandated for legislative changes to address the requirements for complying with state law. I also wanted to note that in the prior biennium, we initiated a land trust in the sense that we had property that was donated to the city for the purposes of affordable housing, and we've issued a request for proposals for development of housing on those properties. And in terms of future, in the upcoming biennium, some major projects that we're looking at include continuing to implement the city's housing production strategy, which was a 8-year plan adopted by the City Council in 2023 that outlines activities that the Community Development Department, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Committee, and the Planning Commission will undertake over the 8-year period, We're also going to be working hand in hand with the Public Works Department for the public engagement portion of the Transportation System Plan, which again is a requisite state mandated, but it helps us coordinate between future growth in our community and the transportation needs, not just for vehicles, but a multimodal approach. Most notably, the coming biennium, we're going to be doing a fee comparison for our building department division with other communities around Oregon to see where we fall within that spectrum. Part of this is that Ashland is large. I won't say it's completely unique, but it's unusual in that our building division is funded through the general fund. Most communities have a separate enterprise fund to operate the building division so that it is a cost recovery fee for service, so that the development community pays for the entirety of the building division through the plan review costs and the inspection costs. That necessitates doing a fee structure that is looking for that 100% cost recovery. And that, once we have that information, we'll be coming back to the City Council for consideration of adoption of fee changes in that regard. And that would be in anticipation in the next biennium of creating a separate revenue fund for the building division specifically to no longer have it be paid for out of the general fund. And I think that about covers it. Obviously, you've had an opportunity to review the budget numbers that are presented. I would note that the materials and services line item that you see within the community development department includes professional services that we will expend for consultants to assist with long-range planning projects. It also includes a fair housing analysis within the housing division, includes professional services if needed for inspection services or plan review services due to changes in staff. But most notably within that line item, we also include the housing trust funds, which are awarded by the city and generated through the marijuana tax. So that is essentially concludes my presentation. And I know that following presentations, I'll be available for any questions that you may have.
So we are going to go over finance and technology. The finance department, in addition to now this biennium, we're combining with the Department of Innovation and Technology Information Services. I'm going to start with finance. Finance is made up of 4 divisions, 3 of which is traditionally finance. That would be administration, accounting, and utility billing or customer service. And then the 4th is the city band, the Ashland City Band, that is under finance. Under the 3 finance divisions, we have 8 separate functions. Those functions include accounting or general ledger. That is the division that makes sure that all our books are reconciled on a monthly basis and are free of misstatements. We also have accounts receivable, which together with utility billing collects on all our receivables, and accounts payable, purchasing or procurement, audit, budget, and payroll is under finance. As a data point, utility billing process and collects about $84.6 million in utility receivables, and finance also manages the collection of TLT, transient lodging tax, and food and beverage tax, which we outsource, but we manage the relationship and reconcile the reports, and that totals an additional $13.5 million for the biennium. Still sticking with finance, our future outlook includes continued work to implement software implementations and work to automate process improvements. So we'll be looking, or we are currently looking at payroll software that will dramatically improve our payroll process. And then we're also going to be looking at utility billing software after the budget season is over. We anticipate will also bring other ways of perceiving what our utility billing department might look like going forward. So stay tuned for that. And then moving on to IT, or information services. IT is responsible for the entire city's technology support needs. It includes managing the business servers. For us, that means Tyler Munis, which is our ERP, Energov for community development, and Laserfish, which is what stores all our city records. It also manages the city's software applications and licenses. There has to be a certain level of redundancy in IT to ensure all our data is always backed up. So that's not just financially, but that also is for police and fire, public works, community development, and generally all our city records. Most importantly, IT safeguards the city from cybersecurity threats and works to protect the city's sensitive data, including our financial records, critical infrastructure details, and PII data, or personally identifiable information. And so let's see here. We've got, just to mention, finances stayed at the same level of FTE. We're at 16, and IT is at 4.5, which has gone down dramatically. So there has been some substantial budget impacts in our IT department. Moving forward, some accomplishments. We have made, as I had mentioned earlier, we've made some great strides in process improvements. We've revised and implemented 2 new ordinances around procurement processes, and so making it dramatically also less paper intensive, and then also for customer utility billing policies, which is to further clarify our delinquency processing and collections procedures. We also implemented proactive investment management, so that aided in bringing in additional earned income interest income for our wildfire division, and that was to the tune of almost $1 million last biennium. And then finally, Moody's, which is our rating agency, has reaffirmed our high credit rating of AA3. Not just for the full faith and credit, but also for our water system. And for information systems, some of the great work that they've been doing is bolstering and solidifying our network systems. We continue as a municipality, as all municipalities do, must safeguard from cyber attacks, and we do it on a daily basis. And so various levels of network security is always at work doing that. And then they have also been working on a computer replacement policy, which is going to help the budget going forward in terms of planning and working on aging computer equipment. Major changes in the budget. The IT director role was eliminated, and so that has been merged within finance. We combined a help desk role with AFN, and then we also eliminated an information systems analyst in role in year 2. And then moving forward. So our total budget looks like this. As we've mentioned before with other departments, finance and IT is no different. We had to make some cuts in our M&S. Personnel for finance has generally stayed the same, but of course those costs have increased due to just general healthcare costs increasing. Information systems has also realized a big impact to their budget. So that has been some savings there as well. Total budget for finance is $6.8 million, and total IT budget is $2.6 million. And from there, I'm going to pass the baton over to administration, city manager's office.
All right, thank you. So we're just going to combine all of administration today. So just as an overview, we're really talking about the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, and I'm going to include HR in that as well today. So in the city manager's office, we work on economic development. We do the city recorder duties. We do communications, emergency management. We have HR, which includes risk management, and our courts, which is a little odd, but that's how we do it because we have an elected judge. And then the city attorney's office, we have 3 staff there, and they are, of course, the legal services for the city. So we have an administrative analyst who fields all kinds of stuff every day in our office. We have the city recorder, the deputy city manager who does economic development, our communications officer, and our emergency manager. A change from last biennium, we do now have 3 HR analysts and an HR director instead of 2 HR analysts. And so one of those is specialized in risk, which has been particularly helpful. And we have in courts 2 clerks there, 1 a lead clerk. And then some things that have changed or what we're looking to fund. So we haven't had any change in personnel except for the HR analyst. We are looking to fund a strategic planning process in our budget. We are continuing to work on a records backlog. Brandon mentioned the digitization project for ComDev. We are swimming in paper, so we are continuing to work on our records retention and destruction to deal with that. We are transitioning some of our communications over to video as we work on our strategic communications with the community. And we are looking to update our emergency management plan for the city, as well as working with our partners. One of them has been the Y, SOU, Shakespeare Festival, et cetera, on their emergency plans. We are in the process of updating city policies and processes with the help of our legal department and HR on that. And then we are going to work on developing an event calendar and prospecting businesses and events in the next biennium to help grow economic development. HR is going to focus on finalizing the citywide handbook, continuing our DEI and employee training, and working with our finance department to implement HR software that coincides with our payroll software initiative. So some technology upgrades as well. Sorry, I pushed the button. Last biennium, we did launch a new website. We were able to hire a communications officer, our emergency operations coordinator, and a deputy city manager. We installed evacuation signs, zone signs throughout the city. We awarded $336,000 to 48 businesses in the city through our TLT beautification grants. And we allocated $140K towards child care grants that benefited 38 children. The city attorney's office will continue to help us anticipate legislation and can support and advise city council as well as the rest of the city. And then they also maintain our criminal prosecution division here at the city. And I think budget. Right, why we're here. So we look a little bit different than last biennium. We are currently moving forward and adjusting the 2200 shelter building. So we have capital funds in our administration budget for that. So that is the difference you see there. And then like everyone else, not a huge change. If anything, a reduction in materials and services, and then a kind of consistency across the board with personnel.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the Parks Department, introducing our Parks Director, Rocky Houston.
Good afternoon. For the record, Rocky Houston, Ashland Parks and Recreation Department Director. I first want to thank our Parks Commission, Brandon Terry, and our administrative staff in the preparation of our budget, as well as finance and city manager's office. It's been a fun process, so thank you. In front of you is our 35 FTE that will be with us through this next biennial budget. The biggest change there is you'll see one of our divisions in the past, the Nature Center, is no longer there. That is a reduction that this budget is putting forward. Our administration, our park operation, I think about 66% of our staff are there maintaining our parks, our open space and trails, our recreation program, the golf course, and our senior services program. Next slide. Our accomplishments in this last year was a significant increase in utilization of our senior services program. That was brought on by having a temporary full-time employee there to help bridge that gap and move things forward, bring us back to pre-COVID FTE numbers there, and we served more people. We were honored with a certificate from the AARP. We received $1.7 million in state grants to help fund Phase 1 of the East Main Park, which is a replacement community park for the YMCA that was sold several years ago, as well as restoration, rehabilitation of the tennis courts at Hunter Park. Additionally, not showing here, but the community raised another $800,000 to help us do restoration work on the Butler Prazzi Fountain. That was in the World Fair in San Francisco and then came here over 100 years ago. And so we're looking forward to get that accomplished as well. We had a little over 12,000 hours. Majority of those by program-wise would be at the senior center. I think about 4,000 or 5,000 hours there. A lot of that's to help support the RV COGS program to, I always want to say Meals on Wheels. I know there's a different name here for it, but to help feed about 2,000 Ashlanders daily, 5 days a week. And we, with the assistance of council and our park commission, passed a new ordinance to allow alcohol to be sold through special permit for events, which resulted in two wonderful epic Ashland concerts. They're coming back again this year, where we had over, I think, 2,000 participants on a Monday night here in the park. So it was a great addition to kind of revive that feel that we have here at Lithia and in downtown Ashland. Significant changes, as we referenced earlier, is we're missing a program on our org chart. The reductions are limiting that element. We're working with staff right now to identify all the portfolio of services that they delivered and how to provide the highest level we can of those programs, as well as looking at reductions in some of our other programs. And you know, it's a little thing, but it's a big thing. Elimination of our printed guide and going to an electronic version or our website to, again, to continue to reduce costs to ensure that the lowest barrier assets we have, our recreational parks, are open and available to the community. Next slide. So as you'll see here, our personnel and material and supplies and capital outlay are fairly constant. You'll see a slight increase in our capital outlay to continue to try to be in compliance with the fleet standards we have here for the city. We have a lot of vehicles that are beyond their useful life that we're continuing to try to get caught up on. The most significant change is in our capital budget. You'll see about a $10 million change. That's where we have shovel-ready projects that we're looking to move forward with, versus in the previous biennium we had projects that we wanted to do but weren't yet shovel-ready. So we've moved into a 6-year CIP process to capture that work and be planful as we continue to move forward. Thank you.
So that is it with department presentations. I'm going to pass it over to Chair Hunter for the rest of the committee's choosing.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your presentations and the information that you provided. I would like to open it up to questions from the committee. Let me know if you have any questions. Raise your hand and I'll start calling people.
Yeah. Yes, Shane, just a question about process.
Yeah.
Is it questions about all of, because I wasn't here last time. I'm sorry, I missed the last one. Do we want to go department by department, or do you want questions willy-nilly about all of the 4 departments or 5 departments that we heard from just now?
We can start out with questions about any, and then what happened last time was that the questions sort of became focused on one aspect, and then we sort of went to the next one. So yeah, any questions about any of the departments that we saw, or the process or anything like that?
Okay. I guess
All
I
right.
do. I guess I can ask a question now if you.
Sure. Yeah. If you have.
So I've got an overall question of, I suppose, of philosophy, because I'm noticing a running theme through all of these departments and elsewhere is a theme of cost recovery. So we heard about cost recovery in community development with the creation of a separate special revenue fund over the course of the biennium. Not implementing it this time for doing that, I suppose, but there's certainly an element of cost recovery of that. Brandon mentioned that other cities do have such a fund for their building division. We heard about cost recovery, obviously in parks, and I think there was there's some discussion of well, I guess there was no discussion of cost recovery in finance or IT per se, but there certainly is cost recovery in the sense of providing services internally across the bank. So I guess my question really is maybe for the city manager more than for the finance director. What is our philosophy of cost recovery? Are we trying to move towards a world where those services that do have a customer are supposed to cover all of their costs, 80% of their cost, equalized kind of proportion of costs? What's our thinking about subsidy? What's our thinking about profit? We had a comment from a member of the public who was talking about generating profit out of the ambulance, whether that was going to be a profit center or a deficit center. Without going into the details on any one of the specific measures, which I'll have questions for each of the departments subsequently, if we could frame it with the overall direction that we're seem to be seeing in terms of cost recovery?
Yeah, I think there's a general acknowledgement of revenues are not keeping pace with expenses. And so, in the case of community development, having a building division that gets cost recovery is part of state law. So we are looking to come in compliance with that. But in terms of, parks or ambulance or, other departments that are upping their fees, et cetera, we have been evaluating what our peers, what industry standards are, and looking to get caught up. So we've had a long period as a city of delaying or not raising fees. And so what that has created is a lack of revenue coming in to support the services moving forward. And so, each department, they are kind of responsible for forecasting the revenues and bringing forth their recommendations for, what they're looking at with their fees, and what is reasonable given industry standards and what our peer cities are doing. So that has been the direction.
Can I follow up?
Follow up, yeah.
So is it your intention, obviously it didn't happen in this budget presentation, but there are cities that do present budgets in terms of both expenses and revenues by cost center. We certainly do see that with our enterprise funds, but within the general fund, we don't see any of that, even though there are some revenue centers.
So my intent is not to have general fund departments become enterprises, if that's the question. My intent is to have the city be on the same playing field as all other jurisdictions in terms of cost recovery. So, I think some things will always be subsidized, because if we had to charge the true cost of an ambulance ride or the true cost of a swimming lesson, no one would be able to afford that. And so really it's finding that balance of some cost recovery to ensure that service moving forward at the level the community wants. But the general fund is here to fund those services. The general fund is not subsidizing, the fees are subsidizing the general fund for all departments, for parks, for fire, for police. The intent is not to, we only have a fire department if they can 100% recover the cost of the fire department. That's obviously unreasonable.
Just one more.
Sure, yeah, if it's
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate hearing that, the intention isn't to fully recover costs. That would obviously be unrealistic. But we do hear in the community a lot of consternation sometimes about certain kinds of services, programs, recreation services in particular, I guess, but it could go to other things as well. We heard about it, the ambulance as well today from a speaker. Why are we doing this if we're losing money? The golf course is losing money. Spent $500,000 and is bringing in, I don't know, a few $100,000. So it's being subsidized. Why are we doing that? But that's not But you're not looking for a situation where we're trying to cover costs on every single individual item. Same thing with the fields. We heard comments about fields. We're jacking up the Parks Commission has recommended jacking up the cost of fields. Is the intention? The intention is. Wouldn't be. You're not. I guess I'm hearing from you anyway that the intention is not to cover entire costs of that, but to just do something that's reasonable and consistent with other jurisdictions. Is that right?
Yes, I think we've had a lot of long-term agreements that haven't been updated in a long time. And so now, given the kind of widening deficit between the general fund revenue and just the cost of providing that service, we have to evaluate, if we want the service moving forward, an element of cost recovery needs to be considered, and looking to kind of what the industry standard is for cost recovery is, one thing that we have been evaluating to assess that. So I can't speak for APRC or the fields, but in terms of, the miscellaneous fees when they come forward, right? That's an assessment of the cost to provide the service, but also what is a reasonable assumption for getting some of that cost back.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Jeff?
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, I had one question, which we'll come back to later, but that reminds me in real time to follow up on what Councilor Kaplan was saying is, so it feels like, I think, to most people that it's true that we have not had our fees updated and so forth, but we've been kind of chugging along relatively okay. I mean, it could be something in the background. Maybe we could kind of provide a little bit of clarity on kind of what happened this biennium that these things have happened. Was it a spike in cost? Things are outside of our control. Was it we were drawing down? We were able to do things. What can you kind of provide some sort of kind of context and kind of what kind of happened so that we can kind of tell why it feels like such a drastic change this biennium?
Sure. I think there's a general assumption that everything has been fine up until this point, but I think if you were to go back and read the budget message of past budgets, except for the last biennium, there is a consistent trend of, especially for the general fund, that the expenses are going to outpace our revenues, and we are going to have to deal with that at some point. Now, last biennium, thanks to COVID and a lack of staffing, we had kind of a buildup of funds that, due to getting staffing on board, we were able to move a lot of projects forward this biennium. But that was, in essence, kind of one-time money that had been kind of put in the city's savings account. But our intent is not to become a savings bank. Our intent is to provide services for the community. And so we're able to do a lot, like the child care grants, like, all of the pass-through funding that we have done and all of the projects. But this biennium, we've expended all of those funds. And so we're back in the same place where, our expenditures are outpacing our revenues. The other thing that we have and other jurisdictions have is just the increase in personnel costs, right? And so, when healthcare costs are going up 12% one year, 15% the next. That is significant when you have 265 employees. And so personnel are our biggest expense in our budget and are most vital for getting the work done. And so it's trying to balance that. And so it feels like everything's happening all at once because we have delayed or not acted on doing several things. Raising miscellaneous fees or keeping pace with that. We have not addressed the utility rates. We can't do anything about property tax, but the city, through the electric user tax, has had kind of a general services tax for a while, which has allowed us to delay implementing other fees. But now we're at a point where that no longer allows for the revenue we need to be able to provide the services the community is looking for. And so that's where you see the public safety fee coming online and the wildfire mitigation fee coming online. And the request for a parks fee is that we can no longer continue this level of service with the revenue we receive in the general fund. And so all of that is happening everywhere at once. So I think it was evident RVTD is facing that last night in their presentation. Funding is changing, grants are changing, and so all government jurisdictions are trying to navigate this now.
Mine's on, I've got a question on this same point.
There.
Yeah, so my question is related to the ComDev and the building department specifically. I saw in the presentation that we would be looking to create a separate fund, more of an enterprise fund to deal with that. But the question of proper or getting to 100% of cost recovery is really about our schedule of fees. And so we can adapt those at any time. We don't have to wait till the end of the biennium to adapt those fees. So my question is maybe twofold. The first is, what is that? Do we know what the current level of subsidy is for the building department or the building division annually at this point? And the second one is, can we adjust that schedule of fees early on in the biennium and save that? I'm assuming that this current budget does not move us towards higher cost recovery at this point. Is that a correct assumption?
That is correct. And so Brandon can speak more to this. I'm unsure about their level of cost recovery now, but this biennium, we need to assess what those level of fees should be. So we need to do the research to see, to get to your point, how much cost recovery do we have now and what do those fees need to be to get full cost recovery? The thing with a enterprise building division is building is not steady. And so there is some thought to, we also need kind of a cushion in there because those ebb and flow, and we don't want to have to ebb and flow staff in the building division because that is very detrimental to the organization to do that. And so how do we effectively create a building enterprise, essentially? What do the fees need to be? Message that with council and discuss that, and then bring that online. And so that is a project for community development this biennium. Now, depending on when we get that done, could we act earlier? Absolutely.
And so to answer the first part of your question, the cost recovery right now through the building department typically hovers between 65 and 75% cost recovery. So the other 25% essentially being subsidized through the general fund for that, for the work that they do. State law requires that any fees collected over a building permit have to be used exclusively for that building division and the services offered. And that's why I think many communities go to an enterprise fund and over time do, if they have a boom period in terms of development, that creates a reserve fund to offset those slow years. So that'll be part of the analysis in terms of the cost recovery. Additionally, as part of this budget, the finance department working with ours has done a good job of incorporating all the internal service charges that are most appropriately attributed to the building division. So those are included in this current biennium so that as we move forward with the formation of a enterprise fund, those would be borne by the building division as well.
The follow-up? Thank you. So do we have any sense of an order of magnitude of how much money we're talking about in terms of that subsidy?
Well, currently, the annual budget for the building division hovers around $870,000. So if you took a 75% of that is fee for service and covers that cost, the remaining
the
175, yeah,
Yeah,
200 or
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So we're not talking
227.
millions of dollars. We're not
Yeah.
talking $20,000. We're talking somewhere in that.
Yeah, on the
1
order
to
of
$300,000
$250,000
something.
per year in additional fees would be necessary to balance the budget as presented this year.
And then one last one, if I could, very quickly. So Sabrina, is it possible for us, knowing the broad outlines of this, to be able to put in place some, at least an interim fee schedule that we think is at least moving us in the right direction earlier than the end of the biennium, and then refine it as that information comes in?
I think that's the expectation, that we would be going through that analysis of other building division costs so that there's parity in Ashland with nearby communities, as well as to ensure that the development costs in Ashland don't outstrip our neighbors, which we have not increased building permit fees in, I think, since 2019. So the idea being to implement those in the first part of the biennium in order to generate the funding, and as such potentially have coming at the next biennium a reserve fund that could be identified as part of the budget process to help
To move into the-
capitalize that enterprise fund going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So really curious, excuse me, conversation that was happening on this side here. And though not maybe directly related to this budget, I think that it helps provide some important context. And Councilor Dale asked, what happened in the last, biennium that got us to this point. And I thought it was really interesting. You were talking about previous budget messages, that this was coming, this was happening. So I'm curious, when we're talking about the fees, the parks, public safety, wildfire, when we talk about some of the parks fees for, let's say, the baseball field, since they were here speaking today, why did this come up last minute? Why weren't we planning for this 2 years ago?
Well, I think we were, and the recommendation was fees because that is what is typical. But I think, the other part is the larger strategic planning process that I've been advocating for, is because we need a community-wide discussion on what is the community's priorities so that we can put our resources towards those priorities, and potentially not towards other priorities. But, that is a prolonged effort, right? And a 10 to 15 year plan. And so, there's several things that need to happen. I think, we have buildings and land we need to divest of. So there are a lot of steps that need to happen. And so we are working on that, but it takes time. And so fees are a short time frame revenue fix. The rest is a longer time frame revenue fix. Fees are not permanent. They can be changed as needed, right? And so there's larger regional studies around fire that are going on, but all of this takes, months or years to work out. And so this will be a continued discussion moving forward, as it has been. The tool that is easiest to use if we want this level of service is a fee, and that's really the question, right? I can't change property tax, though I've been advocating for my Ollie course to take up the mantle on that, but no takers yet. So I think, that is the ultimate fix, but we aren't in control of that. And so there are some levers that we can pull that we are in control of, and part of that is a community discussion to help us prioritize where we should put our resources, and use the feedback from the community to assess the level of fees that the community is willing to pay for that level of service that they want.
Quick follow-up. Thank you, I appreciate that. It's important context. I'm curious though, because we did kind of know that this was eventually coming, we were going to be at this point. So it still doesn't answer the question of why didn't we do this a year ago or 2 years ago? Did you not have the funding to look into the idea of what fees would look like? I mean, it's kind of a 11th hour deal. Why now instead of?
Yeah, I think part of it is, we don't get the projections for like insurance for certain things until January. And so we don't know the magnitude in which that gap is going to be made. And quite frankly, decisions were made last budget to fund certain projects and things that probably, in hindsight, were not ideal long-term, right? So I think this is an iterative learning process for every jurisdiction as priorities and conditions change. And so, we know, barring any sort of large disruptor again, that this is our trajectory forward. And so this will need to be a continued discussion. And the city has, due to kind of turmoil and leadership challenges in the past, not been able to move things forward in a consistent manner, which has been detrimental. So even something as simple as a payroll software system should have been done years ago, but we're doing that now. And so that is why consistency and leadership and a sustained vision around like a strategic plan, I think is very important moving forward.
Bob.
Thanks. Yeah. It's on the same topic. Sure. I appreciate it, and I'm conscious too of not wanting this to be a conversation among the city councilors here and mayor at the table. Jana hasn't had a chance to talk yet, but we have others of the budget committee. They also need to be able to weigh in. But I want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear on this because we're talking in sometimes somewhat loosely, as if that now or in this last year there has been a problem that we've realized. Whereas my reading of it is that the problem really is about projections into the future. There's uncertainty about future revenue, there's uncertainty about future expenses, and that seems to be a widening gap. Because when I look at the general fund balances, our general fund balance currently is well, actually, I can't tell you what it is currently. I can tell you what it was at March 31st, is $20 million. That's 182% of the minimum fund balance by policy. If that could have been coming down rapidly and therefore leading to a sense that, we have a problem. But back in June of 2024, it was $20 million, 388,000. So it was only a difference of less than 400,000. It's not like this thing is shooting down fast, that we're in a crisis. This is I think, an entirely reasonable approach that the city manager is presenting to prepare for the future uncertainty. We don't know what the future is going to be. We do know that the future is going to be a bit rocky. And we think that revenues are going to be less than we had projected previously, and we think that that expenditures may be greater. But this is not about lack of taking steps in the past. In fact, I'm quite impressed with the number of the things that the staff have done to be more efficient, to move to more IT systems, to try to save money in different places. There's a whole host of savings that we could point to, that departments could point to. But this is really about preparing for the next 2 years. So I want to be really careful in these conversations, not to be slipping into this kind of sense that, there's this deficit. There's no deficit. Certainly the Parks Department has not overspent their budget in this current biennium. We're talking about the budget going from July of 2025 to July of 2027. We're not talking about what happened in this budget. They've stayed within their budget in that, and other departments have too. And to the extent that we've continued to maintain a very healthy fund balance.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that. I think to Councilor Kaplan's point, the budget is different from the spending, right? And so a budget is our best estimate, given the information we have at the time, to make a 2-year projection. And I'm pretty sure in my budget message last time I said, this is a very conservative budget, and I hope I'm wrong, and that we see more revenue than we're projecting. But given the level of uncertainty, I don't want to be in a critical point where we overestimate and then find ourselves on the wrong side of that estimation and having to make rapid changes midstream. And so, our departments have done a lot of work. We have done a lot of cost-saving things. We have streamlined, and no one has actively overspent. Now, we have had pressures from unfunded state mandates, like the paid leave program, that has put pressure on the general fund that we have no control over, and we just have to adjust for. And so, I think staff has done a magnificent job with this current budget. There was a ton of work that was done this last biennium that needed to get done, and they did it.
I still have you for parks. Let me know if, I'm ready. Yeah. Well, Linda, do you have something related to this?
Well, I just want to.
Turn on your
sorry.
microphone.
I just want to say that in the last CBC, 23-25 CBC meeting, we did make recommendations to consider other revenue sources. Fees are the most regressive of those. And I just want to make sure that we're continuing to look at other revenue sources. We've got a food and beverage tax that's coming up for sunsetting. And there are ways to support levies and that kind of thing. So these fees that have been resolved to happen and possibly change with the Parks Department are regressive, and I look at them as a Band-Aid through to long-term planning, looking forward.
Gina.
Thank you. So, there's a lot of good things that have been said, and I appreciate everything that has been said. And to question for our city manager is, earlier you said, looking at previous budgets, how when we were in the pandemic, that kind of filled the hole. That was federal money that carried us across. And I don't know if that's when we just kind of laid back for a minute and let that fill the hole, because my thing here is what I hear is strategic planning and moving forward. This is where we are now. How do we never find ourselves in this position again? And when you mentioned before listening to our citizens and listening to the community and having a community meeting, I'm all for that. Last biennium, we had a town hall, we had community meetings, and something that was brought forward when it came time to listening to the citizens and the residents, what could we cut? When we did the dot matrix at the Armory, number one was Oak Knoll. We did a survey later, number one was Oak Knoll. I believe that it's time for us to listen to the people, because either way, it's going to fall on the ratepayer. So when I listen to fees and I listen to taxes, and this is what I hear, my question is, other than fees and taxes and hitting the enterprise fees for our residents and our utilities, have we thought about other ways of generating revenue? I mean, I look back since I've been in this seat, well, that seat over there, the population in Ashland has not changed tremendously. And I hear the services, the staff, things continue to go up, although I know that things have been delayed. However, if everything is checks and balance, and we are still getting hit with this at the 11th hour, question number one, what are we going to do so we don't find ourselves in this place again the next biennium? And question number two is, what other roads, avenues are we looking at other than hitting the ratepayer? Something was brought up was the 5% meals tax. Pretty soon in this budget, we have a cost of a water treatment plant that we don't have the money for. And I'm a huge advocate of that water. That 5% meals tax was put in place to pay for the wastewater treatment plant. Why can't it pay for the water treatment plant? The ratepayers are getting hit and slammed with all of a sudden life is going on and then boom. I understand that things have to progressively move up. This is huge.
So I can't really speak to Oak Knoll. That would be an APRC decision. In terms of the water treatment plant, there was an overwhelming support with that ballot measure to move forward. And we are moving forward with the WIFIA loan on that. So I can't guarantee we won't be in this place next biennium because things are only going to continue to get more expensive. So I do think we need to do the work in terms of the strategic plan, and we need to have a conversation with the community about the level of service that they want and what they're willing to pay for. There is no magic fix for this. We need people. People cost money. We need things to do the service. Things cost money. So I can't guarantee that we're not going to have a situation where we're talking about fees or other revenues moving forward. That is what's happening with all jurisdictions. And, you know, in terms of divesting of property, there are many city properties that will be coming forward with consideration for divestment. And I'm sure there will be parks properties that come forward with consideration for divestment.
If I may, Chair. So when I mentioned Oak Knoll, and I know that's an APRC thing, but it's, to me, it's listening to the community. So in looking at this citywide meeting and putting a strategic plan in place and hearing earlier that this budget process starts in November, my question is looking at the starting of the budget process in November, how do you see us moving forward with the speaking to the community, bringing them forward, and looking at the forecasts kind of broadly across all departments and bringing us all together for this strategic plan that we keep talking about?
Yeah, I would say for this budget, you know, we had the livability survey where parks was highlighted as the #1 thing this community appreciated. And so for the strategic plan, we will be, you know, if that gets funded, bringing on consultants to help with the public meetings that will entail. And my hope is to partner with SOU and the school district to ensure we get a wide array of feedback from various demographics within the community. So I don't have a crystallized plan yet for that, but the intent is it will probably take many months and have many public forums. I think the Parks Department, Director Houston's PROS plan, where he has had public meetings throughout the city multiple times, is a really good model that we can base ours off as well.
Last question, really quick, if I may. Thank you, Chair. So you mentioned the status of the WIFIA. I know that the food and beverage was brought in front of the community and the people voted. It can be brought in front of the community again when we get hit with this water rate. However, looking at the cost and the impact where somebody, the average person, will be charged $73 in change before they even turn the water on or flush a toilet. That is ridiculous. So the water, that 5% meals tax can go back to the voters and ask if they would like to take a portion of this money to pay the water treatment plant. Is that correct?
So that's already been discussed, that is a council decision, and so that will be a council discussion later this summer.
I don't know. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes. One of the things that I think can be easy to do is to get into a place like this and forget the reality of what the last several years looked like. Right before COVID hit in February of 2020, we were getting ready to start a strategic planning process. Like everything else, it got put on hold, set aside. With many other communities like ours, the federal funding that came down to help with COVID helped to alleviate some of our immediate budget problems at that point. So we were able to move through, but we were hit extraordinarily hard with resignations and retirements, just like every other municipality was hit during that time. And I think it would be hard to overestimate what that means in terms of a community's ability to think in a forward way. We were simply trying to maintain services with an organizational chart that looked like someone had shot it with a shotgun. And so this process of putting people, highly qualified people back into those positions, it has taken some time. And we are now at the place, and that's why we have all these questions in front of us, is because we now have the people in these positions who can tell us, here's what's coming, here's what we see, here are the decisions that have to get made. And that's why this is happening in this way. Now, moving forward, I think it's an important question of how do we set up that forecasting so that we have more time when we see a major disruption coming. And so one of the things I would like this committee and the council eventually to think about is, what is that? And I think, Mary Ann, you may have mentioned this, of a mid budget recap and reforecast. So not as deep of one as you would go into for an actual budgeting process. I think the 2-year budget makes a whole lot of sense. But let's come together in that mid-range point and let's look for those major changes that we see coming in these various line items so that we have some time to have a conversation, if we have to, with the community to do some things out ahead of time. Because otherwise, it's a structural question. If we do the projections starting in November ahead of the budget season, if that's all we do, then we are likely to see these major shocks at that point. So my hope is that this committee would consider that type of a recommendation to formally come from this committee to the council to potentially reconvene this body once at the midpoint of the budget.
Thank you. Megan?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what I heard community members saying is not necessarily that they are even opposed to fees, but that they did not feel like that they had any consultation in this process. And as we're talking about, like, well, how long have we known about this, and when did the budget process start in November? It sounds like we've had time to consult with local groups, but that they didn't feel like they were consulted. So my question for staff is, what is the typical practice in this budget process to consult with community organizations? Not just individual residents coming to meetings, but groups of folks that are already gathered and can share about the interests of their constituents. Is there a regular practice of that? And to help move us to the parks discussion, I would really love to hear about who parks consulted with or not over the fees.
So you're talking about fees for service? Okay. So that would be potentially Rocky. I don't know if you want to come.
But I suppose in general, just even beyond fees, just for the broader budget, there are many different community groups throughout Ashland that represent different pieces that the various departments serve. So do the departments have a practice of consulting with community organizations?
I would say typically, the miscellaneous fees, so fees for service, we're looking to do some sort of increase based on CPI. We're not asking community members how much they're willing to pay or how much they want to pay for things, but that is something we can consider moving forward.
Thank you. So my answer is going to be layered, and I apologize. I'm new, so I'll continue to say that until you guys tell me not to anymore. The fee process that we have right now corresponds with the budgeting process. So when we're looking at our fee review, that was occurring towards the end of, we submitted our budget and then we started looking at those fees. There was prior work looking at that long term. What we want to do is develop a cost recovery policy. Some work was occurring in the department. It sounds like very similar to the strategic planning the city had, in that it paused and now we're trying to take that up. So typically you look at what does it cost for me to do something? What is my cost recovery goal? And then that sets that fee. In our situation, we looked at what our reductions needed to be to make sure that we're fitting our policy, and we looking at those sources. And so what we did is we looked out and did a neighbor analysis. So we looked at, for sports fields, we looked at what are being charged for other sports fields and how do we compare. $250 a season for up to 7 days use versus anywhere from $180 down to $15 an hour in our neighbors. So that's where we did and looked at that, and then made some proposals to our park commission. In regards to our other fees for service, again, we looked at what our costs are that we had data for, and we're trying to compare that to our neighbors. And always considering that level up, because every increase is impactful. And we utilize our general funds to help support those programs and services we have. That's why we have that there. So that's in general the process we utilize this time, and the philosophy I've used other places or other communities use.
So just to clarify, there was no conversation with any of the impacted community groups that will be paying the fees.
We did not reach out in advance. We provided, once we got information, we sent it out in advance of the meeting, so they're aware of the action that was being proposed, but there wasn't several meetings with any of those partners. You are correct.
You can go, Eric. Yeah.
Great questions, community member Wade. I have questions as well, Rocky. And if the future is rocky, there's a joke in there somewhere. Councilor Kaplan made, but no pun intended.
He's new.
So please bring us up to speed. You presented your budget, and I thank you for that. Thank you, your staff, and thank you, commissioners. You have recently had a meeting with the commissioners where you went through and prioritized cuts, and you've came up with the list that you've presented here thus far. I have since received communications from the commission that the commission is now looking at a new recommendation to cover costs to help supplement for service reductions. So I'm curious, that number came in at $6.50. I think that city manager teed up a really nice Band-Aid, if you will, at that $5 park fee that was recommended to begin with. And the commissioners took a whack at the first draft of what they saw would cover fees being at $9. That did not fly in council, and it did not get passed. So I'm very interested in what this $6.50 potential fee could cover. I think it's been said here, and I'd like to say it again. This is not a question of misuse of funds on the parks not having to live within their means. This is a general fund problem with escalating costs and limited revenues, and parks is one of the levers that we can pull relative to what our neighbors are doing to help fund their cities and their parks. I've heard it said before, nobody comes to Ashland to visit Ashland for a wonderful wildfire safety program. That's a livability thing. That's our thing. We all prioritize that. People come here for the parks. Economic drivers are funded through the parks that bring businesses here, that bring people here to spend money, and that's what I think is the Band-Aid to stop any kind of potential bleeding from those types of livability and economic things we have. So back to this parks fee. So City Council can recommend that the Citizen Budget Committee implement a fee. The Citizen Budget Committee can recommend that the City Council adopt a fee. So this committee can recommend a fee. So I'm curious, if we do recommend a fee, whether it be council or the CBC, what are we going to buy with that $6.50? Have you already laid off the Nature Center employees? I assume not. These are things that are happening in July. So could you speak to that last meeting and what I just addressed?
Sure, I'll try to address the first thing first. So we've noticed the two affected parties already, so they've been noticed of their layoff. So that is in process, pending the budget direction we've submitted so far. In regards to the what $9 versus $6.50, if there was a park utility fee, it generates the same number of dollars. And the reason why is I was working off of a number of $750 $600,000 being produced with a $5 fee for 18 months. And so after our last meeting, we worked with finance to reconfirm those numbers. We've identified that $5 park fee generates additional revenue for 18 months than we were projecting. And as such, the $6.50 equates to about $1.4 million in revenue. What that means is the baseline budget that every other general fund department is looking at, our materials and supplies budgets being flat or reduced from the previous year, is what we've carried forward. The additional dollars that the Park Commission moved forward was to help support that FTE for the senior center, given that additional use and getting that back to meet a large portion of our population. The bringing back on has been fallow asset of Pioneer Hall and the community center for more than 5 years. So we've not been operating those, so having staffing and funding to operate those. And with the bringing on of East Main, the replacement park for the YMCA park, operational dollars to actually be able to operate that park once it's developed phase 1. So that's what those are due. So if we get the park fee, our goal is to not have to have such large reductions in recreational resources and restrooms. We'll still have to tighten our belt. But again, as we've done historically, is a lot of the stuff we're doing are on professional services and contracted services, trying again to make sure that the programming that we do have out there is available for the community.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. How does the $6.50 or any fee for that matter affect the park's fees for things like our Little League fields and other rate increases that are going to affect community groups?
So that depends upon what so we have a recommended fee that just went through the process for all those things. Those right now would remain forward and I believe are coming forth to council for review with all the other city department fees. We would be able to revisit our budget and look to see if there are any changes in that.
Okay.
We're at a deficit in that we don't manage our operational budget in a way to where I can tell to any one of you exactly how many dollars and cents or hours I have for this one asset. That's something we're trying to move forward to where we can provide more transparency on what a baseball field versus a soccer field versus a koi pond costs us to operate. And so that's something that does look, so in short, we have to kind of continue to see there's still reductions in our materials and services that we have to still try to work into with the goal of having things look the same the next 2 years in regards to our programs and services as they do now, knowing that we're going to continue to have to change, because I think I've heard a couple times here is none of us want to have this feeling and experience in another 2 years.
Right.
And so how do I reshape and continue to move the department forward to not only meet the needs that are brought forward by the community through our strategic planning, but also control costs?
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I wanted to speak to a handful of things, but it occurs to me, Rocky, while you're sitting there, that I want to kind of say a word of appreciation. A couple weeks ago, during a council meeting, it was the words didn't come out right from myself, and what I was trying to articulate was we think about the departments within the general fund, and when we have ending fund balances, we don't necessarily have them by department. And so when it comes to parks, or it comes to fire, or it comes to police, or it comes to ComDev, there are these things when you're doing your best, but you can't just look and forecast as best as possible. So I just wanted to call that out to a larger and appropriate audience as we're in budget, that's a very important distinction that we have to keep in mind when you're doing your best to be able to forecast. Now, to my larger point, a lot of wonderful ideas and a lot of very valid points made around the dais here. I want to kind of call attention to what the mayor said too, which was, you look back, and speaking personally, we have a council vacancy right now, and while it feels like it's been a better part of a decade that I've been sitting in this chair, it's only been 2.5 years or so, and And there was an appointment that I chose to throw my hat in the ring. And the reason was there was this instability that I felt in the community. And it was of no fault of anything. It just kind of was leadership and so forth. And we need to really call out the fact that what do we tell our children when they're struggling? It's one step in front of the other. And that's just what you do until you can come up for air. And that's what's been happening for the past 2 years, 4 years, and I appreciate that. But looking forward, if I'm hearing it correctly, there's really kind of two components that we need to consider. And one is kind of we get GFOA awards in the budget every time this comes out, we get the gold star in the front. And the accounting is spot on, but it sounds to me like there's this groundswell of wanting to turn that more into kind of a forecasting to the best extent that when we do these quarterly reports, there's a forecasting component. So we can try to catch these things in addition to having, an off-year true budgeting. But something like that is kind of an idea I think that I'm hearing as well as the ideas and really the way that we're going to get ourselves out of this in addition to like the general fund is you've got fees, but it's reasonable informed growth. I couldn't catch Brandon before I ran to the back of the room, but I know he didn't leave. But I was going to ask about, like we were looking at cost recovery relative to rates. It's kind of the same thing along with parks. It's like, well, it's not linear, right? We can't just charge more because there's a value, there's a demand, right? It's rate doesn't equal revenues. And so part of what I was going to ask Brandon was, are we looking at new innovative ways to say, okay, that's cool how we do that, but how are we driving demand and growth and ease and incentivizing? Kind of the same thing with parks. I assume that we innovate our way out of this is kind of how we do this. And so I think that that's something as we keep in mind as we go forward, that there's some levers and it's not just fees, it's innovation, it's structural forecasting, it's thinking about ideas, it's making the best assumptions we can outside of a black swan event or whatever. And we do our best. Is that, I guess the question is, does that sound reasonable or where staff is heading? And that might be to you, Sabrina.
Sorry. Yeah, I think there's an element of innovating our way out of this to a certain extent, but there is going to be eventually a wall, and really it becomes a discussion of, service level for the community. So I think there's two parts to that. And I will say that staff has been very innovative and dealt well with my push to change things. I think generally governments, we're not quick changers. We don't turn on a dime. We're not known for being innovative. I'm sure this is not news to anybody. But I feel like staff the last couple of years has really done a good job at looking at process improvements and making changes with the support of council, because that often involves council's approval. Something so simple as changing the procurement rules has really streamlined the way we do business. And so I think we continue to do that, and there's definitely continued opportunity. But that being said, innovation also costs money sometimes. And so how do we balance that?
Dylan.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's kind of bring it back here. I guess point of clarification for the chair and Mary Ann. Would this be an appropriate time to discuss possible changes to the budget so that you have time over the next week to implement those and make any adjustments needed?
If the chair agrees and the body agrees and approves, the changes very well
I can speak to it first if that helps.
Sure. I think we have a couple more questions to get through before we
Okay.
really dig into that.
Sure.
Yeah, totally. Right. Kristen.
Hi, this is my first meeting. Nice to see everybody. I just want to thank the staff. I know that this process is grueling to go through any budget process, and just appreciate the opportunity to be here as a voice as a citizen. I also think I've heard a lot of great things in terms of improvements like a strategic plan. I think that would be important. We have every industry has found itself in the same position. I work in healthcare, and we're in the same position, trying to come out of COVID, and then what is the future? So level setting, getting input from its citizens and stakeholders, I think is critical. I do think another mid-year review in the budget would be important too, because it's hard to set a budget for 2 years. Things change, crises happen. I do think, as we see the budget come out and we're processing, and I think one of the biggest complaints that I'm hearing as a citizen, and I have a 5-year-old, is some of the budget hits, and everybody's cutting. You can't survive without cuts. But some of the budgets, especially with parks, seem to be targeted to kids. It's increased fees of the we heard today, the Little League. But it's also, you saw on the screen, it's the pool, it's the ice rink, it's everything like that that's impacting children. But it's hard to just look at the expenses when you're not seeing the revenue. How much revenue is Oak Knoll bringing in? I mean, it's hard. How much are we subsidizing that? That's I'm new to this, but why aren't we seeing a revenue line? It's hard to process. I've never seen it like this. In other industries, you're seeing a regular P&L. You're seeing revenue and expenses. So I think it's hard to weigh in on that without seeing that. But so I mean, maybe this is for the parks, but have you considered other things as part of this other than just cuts to things that seem just like to kids? I think the other thing that's glaring, at least to me, and what has been brought to me, is when you look at the administrative functions, you can clearly see consolidation, reduction in FTEs, like you can see that happening. For parks, when I look at the org chart, you see 35 FTEs and 10 or 11 leadership roles. And that stands out to me, where you've got only a couple of FTEs under one leader. Is there some consolidation, and did you consider that when you're focusing on, if we want to provide services to the community, do we really need that many leaders in those positions?
So I can speak a bit to, well, Rocky's going to have to come up here. You're not out of it completely, sorry. A bit to the direction that I gave Rocky in terms of when we're looking at cuts. And one of the big things that our Parks Department does is wildfire mitigation. And so working with Rocky, the focus has been on maintaining access to our free spaces, essentially. So our playgrounds, our open space, but also that there's not really an option to violate our own ordinances and not maintain the parks to the level that we must for wildfire mitigation. And that is the bulk of what parks does, right? And that is the bulk of the expense of parks, quite honestly. And so no amount of pool recovery is going to cover that operational thing. So, then unfortunately APRC and Rocky has to make the assessment of how do we have or not have, depending on funding, kind of the nice to haves. And I think there's a perception that, the splash pad, just turn it on and it's fine. Well, there's testing that has to be done multiple times a day so we don't all get, dysentery or whatever. I know that's probably not right, but Oregon Trail stuff, right? And so we don't want that. And so I think there's a perception that some of the stuff that we're reducing, just turn it on and leave it and it will be fine. But there's a public health component to that too. So I'll let Rocky speak more to that. But I am part of the problem, and that my direction has been, we must not burn the town down.
So earlier I said 66% of our workforce is on maintaining our parks. And so we had to look at our mandates. What we did look at is, so I'm going to take a step back. 12 years ago, I had 50.55 FTE. Today I have 35. So we've been making cuts significantly over the years and we've chosen to reduce those staff to change the look. I've coined a phrase several years ago for parks doing less. It's called naturescaping. It looks natural, doesn't it? It's all right. But that's not Lithia Park. We have a different level there. As you go farther up the canyon, of course, it changes. So just making sure that we did that. So on our professional services, we hit there. So we eliminated our seasonals, that staff to help support. We looked at all those other contracts and elements, removing trash cans, all those things to reduce our bill. Here's a little factoid I just learned this week. I've already put 1 million gallons of water on North Mountain Park. 1 million gallons already this year. So those operational things to make sure that their operational costs a lot of funds. So just like in your budgets, like mine in my household is, it's usually you have your essential things. I got to pay my mortgage. I got to make sure my light bill's paid. And then the fun stuff sometimes are those things that we try to keep around but are hit. And so when we were looking at the golf course, we were looking at ice rink, we had to hit a number. And so we had to continue to go down and remove all those things, professional services, those things that we could hit before we started looking at programming. And so we looked at a rubric trying to look at what's the number of users we have versus our cost and our labor impact. And so that was the sort of the rubric we were looking at to look at. So we identified that our parks have the lowest barrier, lowest cost to come in and have fun. And so we did everything to meet the mandates that the city manager referenced as well, but to keep those open. Because you just walk in, there's no cost for them. And then as we continue to move through it, we looked at how many annual users are we getting. We've heard the golf course a few times. I have 30,000 user occasions there a year. And depending upon how you look at cost recovery, most departments look at cost recovery for in the recreation field based off of what's it cost for me to do that recreation, the staffing. So those maintenance costs, those facility costs, those lights usually aren't incorporated into that. In our golf program budget historically, we've included those operational costs in, so it looks different. It doesn't look like the pool. It doesn't look like the ice rink. But when we actually look at this biennium, we're bringing in, I think our forecast is $560,000. I look back to Brandon because he knows the numbers better than I, but we're bringing in almost as much as those recreational costs of the clubhouse costs are. So it's roughly around $100,000 is the support. I don't like the word subsidy. It's support from general fund. Those general funds that are there to support general fund programs. Subsidy makes it seem like we're not good enough. So it's a word thing for me. Subsidy implies that, and maybe it's because I was a kid who got subsidies. I stood in the line for the cheese. I got those free lunches. But so we looked at those number of users. That's why our Nature Center program, it used to have a different business model. Kids came from all over to come in and do that. And something happened where that they don't come anymore. And so we've been in a position of trying to transition to environmental education to meet the current business model. So we don't have as many users. That could be argued, of course. Our community garden has lots of user occasions, but we have about $500,000 in cost and about $12,000 in revenue. And so we are looking at what's the impact to the general fund and the number of users. And so not saying that how we chose it was perfect, but it was trying to look at how do we keep as many things open as we can and still hitting that number of $14,397,650. And that was the bottom line we had to get to through that process.
If I could also just make a point of clarification for Committee Member Roy's comments and something for the committee in general. Something that is inherent to government is fund accounting. So it's not like looking at a typical profit and loss or P&L where we're going to just focus on the revenues. We can certainly drill down on revenues if you'd like during this process, but none of the departments in general fund can sustain itself. That's why it's in the general fund. And that's one of the reasons why parks used to be a general fund. We can't have two general funds. We can only have one general fund. The general fund does substantially not subsidize parks, but contributes to the parks' efforts and expenditures, et cetera. So I just wanted to make that kind of distinguishment of it, yeah.
And Marianne, I don't know, or maybe Bryn, could you open the budget book and demonstrate on OpenGov how you can drill down and you can see the projected revenues for the golf course, for the pool, for the rink. Now they're going to look a little different because they're in their own category, and then you don't just see like the pool budget right next to it. But you can get to that level of detail in OpenGov.
Chair, may I? I didn't answer CBC Committee Member Number 3 Roy's other question. So you asked about, are we top heavy, to simplify it. So we're in the middle of a class and comp. So I can make no changes to my department until the class and comp is completed, and then we can move forward with any changes. In recreation, I agree that it appears that way, but we don't have drinking coffee looking at spreadsheet managers. We have working managers who are out there doing the work as well. So even though they have the title of manager, my superintendents are out there doing work. My recreation manager is at the pool. They're doing work as well. But that is something that I am very painfully aware of, and that's something we can work on through the next biennium, again with support of our strategic plan, staff input, and human resources. Once I have a tool that it is open to utilize again.
Sorry, point of clarification, a Class M comp?
So, Sabrina, it's classification and compensation is a analysis in comparison to other communities that is completed periodically to determine whether or not our classifications are equivalent to the work they're doing, and as our compensation at market rate. And so that is a tool that's utilized to ensure that we are keeping the best and brightest employees.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? I just wanted to ask Rocky, when does that class in comp sundown until it's complete?
So we are almost done. It will come to council at the next council meeting.
Bob. Yeah. So I have a question. I know Councilor Bloom is anxious to get a motion or something on the table, but I think we may have to do that next time. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to do it today because we only got 4 minutes left, unless we can go
We
long.
go to 5:30.
We go to 5:30. Okay, great. Great, even better. So Rocky, when I look at the budget proposal that you submitted, I see, Parks did submit a budget that for fiscal 25-26 that is 3.2% less than it was in fiscal 24-25. But within Parks, the operations piece, and you've talked to this a little bit, is really what's going up. It's going up by 22%. It's going up from $3.4 to $4.1 million, while open space, recreation, and the nature center are going down by a corresponding amount, saving. So what it looks like is that you're able to fund the increase in costs that you're expecting in operations of about $700,000 by gutting these other programs. Now, I understand that's partly occasioned by. You got the sense that there's these increasing costs to maintain the parks, and you've talked about that. And that you have to gut these other things because you don't have a funding source for that in the meantime. Now, Linda talked about this as being a Band-Aid, and in a sense, if it's not just a Band-Aid, it really has to drive some really hard thinking by you and by the Parks Commission on specific things that you're going to do, over the next biennium at the same time to try to get more efficiency or to try to control some of these skyrocketing costs that you're projecting in your operations division. What kinds of things that you can do so that you don't have to gut the open space and recreation programs in the nature center into the next biennium if the council were to approve a fee. So I'm looking for some sense from you, the kinds of things that you and the Parks Commission are really doing to try to really sharpen your pencil and see what kinds of things you can do. You talked about hardscaping, I think, in the budget book on certain kinds of things. I think there's a whole list of things like that. But I'd like to get some sense from you how much you think those kinds of things can save going forward, projecting forward. Not necessarily be able to do that, but in supporting a budget for the Parks Commission, for the Parks Department, I would, I'm going to be looking for some real commitments from you and the Parks Commission on how you're going to be looking at containing costs going forward, even with a fee. One of the things that stood out to me as well, this is perhaps related but not entirely, For the first time under accomplishments, this is my third budget committee party, I guess you call it. This is the first time that I've ever seen the Parks Department call out the number of volunteers. Volunteers as an accomplishment. And I think it really is. The volunteers are an accomplishment. We've got a very volunteering community, and it's good for the volunteers. It enriches the community, enriches people personally, which is our community feeling. And it's also a way that parks can kind of perhaps manage some costs. I'm wondering, are you thinking about a win-win strategy going forward to invest more in volunteer? I know you're actually giving notice to people that manage volunteers, but is there room in the world of parks in the going through and out of this next biennium where you could take advantage of that win-win thing? It's actually a program as well as it is a potential not labor force, but way to get some things done in this community.
So initially, I moved a couple staff around, and I think that inflates that change that you saw. So we had our volunteer coordinator in our open space budget. I felt that they manage a broader portfolio than just open space, so I moved it to parks. Our park superintendent, again, was an admin, and we moved it down into park operations, again, to reflect, to kind of get those costs more aligned in regards to what they're doing. And thinking long-term, I think there's a lot of stuff. In regards to volunteerism, we have a graffiti group. They don't even they help us, but also Public Works. They go around town removing stickers and gum and all kinds of wonderful, colorful language on all over town. And that model intrigues me in that they're self-sufficient in regards, we have a well-trained crew boss, for lack of a better word, volunteer boss, that then comes in, we give them their supplies, and they go out and kind of do the work. And so we've been looking at, can we do a train the crew boss sort of thing for some of our tasks so that we can more easily put out on our website, come on Tuesday to Lithia Park from these hours, and have someone there to where it doesn't take the same level of staffing. As we look at our coordinators that we do have, looking to see how can we change work up to increase our capacity to manage more volunteers. Volunteers are great, but they can only do certain things, and there's not an hour for a full-time employee based off of the equipment, expertise, et cetera. And so again, it's making sure that we're pointing them in a spot where they're meeting our needs, to take work away from our other staff to where we can do more, as well as make sure that they feel supported and happy and joyous for doing it. They're coming out there to give their sweat equity and their time, and making sure that we have the capacity to appreciate that as well. And sometimes I've been places where we get, we were trying to do too many things, and then that ends up snapping back like a rubber band into us. And so we're looking at a lot of our operational elements. We're looking at our level of service in regards to what we are doing from a maintenance perspective, our frequencies, all those things, so that our classification of our parks will help with that, so that we, based off of one maintenance level for all parks sort of thing, to where a regional park like Lithia is going to have a much higher level of service versus a pocket park may not. Looking at irrigation to not only preserve water, but just preserve funds to go into another program, as well as making sure that through that process we're not killing mature trees that need that water. They've had it for the last 80 years. And so those are sort of those elements that we're looking at. We're looking at our structure of our operations and of our teams to again to ensure that we can do the right things and not do the things that people want us to do but aren't really hitting that core mission. Kind of getting to what Sabrina was saying earlier, is making sure that we're meeting our mandates, challenging some of those mandates if needed in regards to our capacity to do that, and looking at what our portfolio looks like of acreage, and is that sustainable for us as we move forward. And I think it comes back to the expectations of the community, what the community wants, and our capacity. And I think that's where we're in that assessment, is trying to figure out what our capacity is, so we can come forth and say, I can't do this. I can't do this thing or that thing, and get that policy direction from our Parks Advisory Board, or Park Commission. Sorry, I slipped up and went to another time. Park Commission to do that. And I think in front of the Budget Committee in 2 years, or tonight, our Park Commission and Council, there's going to be a lot of policy decisions as we continue to wrangle with what we've done in the past. 20 years ago, my buying power with inflation was 25 million versus 14. $9 million does a lot of difference in regards to great community things we can do in parks. And so that's all that stuff is, I think I had a huge house once. It was huge by my standard. And then it was just 2 of us in the house. And we're like, why do we have this big a house? We only need so we downsized. And I think that's that same sort of process we're looking at here.
Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, and I definitely want to get to questions, get to some clarifying understanding. People seem to be asking questions about that before we get into making recommendations, motions, and stuff like that. Totally. yeah, for sure. But Mayor, did you have something?
I think I'm looking to get to some of those discussions about recommendations or direction to staff to come back next week. So
Okay.
after the questions.
Okay, all right. Meg.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with a lot of the comments that Committee Member Roy made earlier, and the sort of sense that it does seem to be, many of the cuts do seem to be impacting youth programming. And so I think the question I've been hearing from community members is not about like, oh, they understand needing to make cuts, but there's a question about priorities. And it sounded like you have data on the cost per user for many of the programs, and how much support that each of those are getting from the general fund. I don't feel like I've been able to make that number really clear from looking at any of the data that we have, and I'm wondering if it's possible. I think that folks would have a lot more confidence in whatever decisions are made if we were able to put those numbers in front of the community, and is that possible?
So my data on cost per user, cost per program is pretty good to not at all. And so I don't have a constant set of data for that. So if it's the pool, I know it costs me $20,000 to do 2 weeks, 9 sessions for lessons. I get $5,000 to $7,000 in revenue. So on the pool or on the ice rink, I know how much my costs are, but when I look at some of my other recreation program, I don't have that same level of data to provide. And so that's I don't want to make a lot of assumptions, and if I have missing data, it also is sometimes twice as bad.
But is it possible for us to see what data there is with the notes about where it's incomplete?
I have a very high level rubric of what the budget is and revenues and usership. So I have that's readily available and has been shared to the Park Commission on a couple different occasions.
Marianne, is it possible to have that shared with the?
So I can say from a finance standpoint, what we have is by division. So it's not as granular as by user and the specific fees for pool and the ice rink, et cetera. We actually do have those revenues in the budget, the online budget book. But from a perspective of analyzing it by division, we can provide that, if that is something that you would like.
I think that folks would really appreciate that, and if you're able to share whatever has already gone to the commission with the budget committee. I know I've been trying to dig through notes from the past meetings, but there's a lot of documentation.
I'll make sure Marianne has it.
Just as a note, we do have a joint council and parks meeting coming up at 6, and a lot of what you're talking about now is going to be discussed. So the budget committee is welcome to attend that meeting as well.
Great. Ariana.
Hi, Rocky. I'm new as well. So work through this with me. I think that I've gotten the cost recovery questions answered. You have some data, but not a whole bunch. And so for the ones that you didn't have data on, you looked, well, for all of them, you looked at neighboring communities to see what their charges were and applied those to our own parks. Did you do any customer sense of, well, I guess not. If you don't have the data, you don't have the data. So that's just kind of where this falls. So we need to get the data. Or did you all getting the data would be fantastic. I think it would help your planning. And so my question is about what you talked about maybe 20 minutes ago, about the fee offsetting some of the cost recovery that you're trying to do. Did I hear that correctly? That the parks fee of $650 could possibly offset?
I said we would have to look at that based off of what our things are. Sorry, things is such a fancy word. And we'd have to work with our park commission and then come to council for any modification of our fees.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Sure.
In the revenue section on the budget book, there's $17K for the Nature Center. So does this affect, so is this a kind of it's not only changing the expenses for the park department, but it's also taking this revenue out that I see here?
Correct. If we don't have the Nature Center program, we wouldn't have that revenue source.
Kristen?
Just one point of clarification. So with the cuts proposed, Nature Center being one of them, pool, does the $6.50 fee cover that cost, or is it the cuts being made and the fee being proposed?
Good question. So if a park fee was to bring in $1.4 million, then that would allow us to offer the same services we have. And when we're talking about restructuring and all those things, as we move into next biennium, we would be looking to have an environmental education program. So it's a rebrand, and I apologize, but that is the goal. So how we operate it may change as we try to be more streamlined and utilize those limited FT we have, but we would have the staff and utilize those to maximize the service level we have for our recreational programming.
So if the $6.50 fee was approved, the two people that got notices to be laid off in the Nature Center would get their jobs back?
We would work through HR to have those positions back, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I give a point of clarification here real quick to committee member Wade's question around the division financials? So I went ahead and I went under department summaries and then chose parks and drilled down, and under the narrative, you'll see each division. And so right now I'm in recreation division. And you'll see here, this is the expense by type. Let's see. We've got the expense detail. We don't do the revenues though, do we?
It's not there.
On the
No,
right.
you got to go the other way.
So I would need to, we would, need to, it's not combined, but we can get that for you. Yeah.
So if you go into budget summaries, there's a revenue and sources summary table. You can drill down into that, and that will get you to specific rink pool projected
right here.
revenue.
This screen, it's not, you would have to toggle. Yeah. And that goes to the point that when we're balancing a budget, we know we have extra, amount of revenues. And so then we're needing to determine how to make the expenditures balance the amount of revenues that we have in fund accounting. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A point of clarification, a lot of the questions that I end up having end up being policy questions. And so what the Budget Committee does is a lot of these are not policy. We don't necessarily, you have an APRC, you've got a council, and those two bodies make policy decisions. So trying to put that back on us to weigh back in on these other two groups that actually make the policy decisions. I think for the public, it's good to see why aren't we drilling down in some of these layers on this. I have tons of questions I'd love to ask, but from a point of clarification for the public, a lot of what we do is participating in this from a, Oregon regulatory statute standpoint that keeps us to certain things and not other things. So like if I was going to dive into policy questions, it would be like, why can't, the people that came here to speak tonight in the public, a lot of it was about, can you go one more summer with these Little League fields to see if you can accommodate them for 3 months, but that's a policy type question. And those are the decisions that APRC would make or the council would make on these budgets. So, when people look for us to kind of answer some of those questions in this forum, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place for that to happen. So just wanted to, why am I silent on some of these questions? And people have them, but they need to be done in the right form. So.
Thank you. That's good. So then, Dylan, speak away, please.
All right, 15 minutes. I'll try and make it brief here. So this is kind of moving over to the city manager's budget. You'll notice in your budgets and behind Councilor Kaplan there's a little vision and value statement. Up at the top, it's not a ranking, but up at the top there, if you're looking for it, it mentions about community values, community affordability, including available housing and childcare. I'd also like to point out that thank you, Councilor Kaplan. Oh, I'm giving a presentation now. At our last council retreat, where we were prioritizing what we as a council wanted to rank things, right under wildfire was economic development. Included in that conversation was a conversation about continuing these child care grants, and obviously we heard some testimony about that earlier. Child care isn't just about helping the parents, the families, but it is the broader question about economic development. When I have to go to Medford to take my kid to childcare, which thankfully I don't have to, I might consider moving my gym membership, as one of the testimonies came in said. Might end up shopping at Ace Hardware, or Daisy's, I suppose, instead of Ace here in Ashland. That affects our community, that affects economic development, and it is not consistent with our community values by not having the funding for that child care grant included in the city manager's budget. So for those reasons, kind of getting in to actually make a motion recommended a change, I would urge this committee to restore the $240,000 early learning grant in the FY 25-27 budget and move to have that addition added.
So I will need to have a subsequent cut in the city manager's budget.
Yeah, that's why I'm making the motion for you to add it to the budget so that you have a week to identify where you need to move.
So I don't have anything to identify. That will be the work of this body.
So my understanding is that it is not our responsibility or job to go in and start playing shell games with the budget. Our responsibility is to make recommendations about the budget, and it's the city manager, the budget officer, and finance's job to identify how to fill those holes based on the recommendations that this committee makes.
So the city manager's budget, it would require either reducing a staff member or getting rid of like strategic planning money. And so I will need council and citizen budget committee direction on their priority in the city manager's budget for me to consider which one they'd like to see reduced, because my recommendation would be the things in the budget are the priority.
Great, thank you. So I think that what would be helpful and why I wanted to get this done tonight is so that you had the opportunity over the next week to provide some options for this committee, council and the Citizens Budget Committee, so that we could weigh those and make an informed decision. I mean, unless you want me to go through the budget line by line and pull $1,000 out of every little pocket, I can do that, but it doesn't seem like it's appropriate for us to be doing that.
So not line by line, but is emergency management, communications, economic development, what is this body's least priority? In lieu, we could fund childcare. So I just need to know the priorities that way.
So maybe it would be helpful for the committee if I made a motion to direct staff to come back with multiple options for this committee to weigh.
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, so yeah, I'd like to make a motion to request that staff include the $240,000 early learning grant in FY 25-27 budget, and to come back at the next Citizens Budget Committee with a variety of options. 2 to 3 should be sufficient for this committee to deliberate on, and then make final recommendations from there.
Second.
I mean, I think you spoke to the point, but yeah.
I think I spoke to it.
You're
This is
welcome.
fundamentally what we're here to do is we're here to review the budget, ask questions, but also make recommendations of changes that we think need to be made. And I think it's important that we look at our vision and values statement. We look at the vision, the priorities of each individual department, and identifying in the budget if we are actually meeting those priorities. The motion that I just made offered the opportunity for staff to kind of come up with a variety of options that maybe will have the least impact. I imagine that's the approach that would be taken to present those options to this Citizens Budget Committee for the purpose that we're here, to weigh those options and make final recommendations to the budget officer and finance for the final budget.
Gina?
Thank you. I completely agree with Councilor Bloom. This is something that we talked about at the retreat. This is important. This is needed. It does impact our community in a very positive way, and it is economic growth, and that was number 3 on our list. So I totally support this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Meg?
Yeah, I just want to clarify as we begin to make motions about this. So for instance, the instruction to staff to put this grant back into the budget and come up with other options. When we review this next week, if we don't like the other options, we might say, oh, actually, take that grant back out. Right? So we are not voting on definitely making that change. We are voting on making options. Yes.
Yes, and we don't even have to pick the options that are presented before us. We can pick, yeah. Any other discussion? Mayor?
I will be supporting this motion because I do want to have that conversation at a deeper level. But one of the things I think we should consider is right now we're talking about this as a grant program. And I know that there are discussions in the community about a more permanent funding source for this. And so we might want to also think about widening the definition of how those funds can be spent, with the idea being that we would spend this first 12 months of the biennium really working on what is that longer term strategy that doesn't have the city year over year investing general fund money into specific childcare programs, but instead has used that money, that initial investment from the city to help catalyze the longer term solution. So that's the other thing that I would consider that we should talk about next week, is whether there should be some additional flexibility, assuming that this budget committee finds a way forward with the options that it wants to use.
Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We're at this moment now of making changes and asking staff's recommendation. Moving forward, I don't know what this would look like, but I would like for staff to come back to this body with information and status. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, okay, vote. I thought we're done with that. Yeah, okay, vote.
Any other discussion on the motion? Linda?
So I was wondering if you could take money from the revenue building fund?
Sorry. Oh, the reserve?
Reserve fund.
Technically, yeah. I do, maybe if I could have a sidebar with Councilor Bloom real quick before we vote.
Do we go in another room and talk about it? Oh, you're serious?
No, I'm serious.
Oh, okay.
Linda, you opened up a can of worms. That's a good suggestion.
Well, you know,
Does somebody want to move to table that for a second, or?
maybe we could get a discussion about the reserve fund and what it's for and what it's going to be used for. Well, we have the finance officer.
Yes, so the reserve fund currently has 2 million. Right now, it is We have not appropriated anything in there. So it would be by the will of the committee to appropriate funds out of the reserve fund.
All right.
We're back.
Perfect.
Wait, follow up. What's the purpose of the reserve fund right now?
Primarily to stabilize the budget. It's very broad, but
All right.
that's the priority.
And do we have legally mandated minimums for the reserve fund?
No.
All right. Are we ready to vote on this?
Yeah, so real quick, after having a conversation with Sabrina, and it is completely fair that it could be considered. So in full transparency, I did receive some funding for the child care grant. I'm not ashamed to be poor, and I don't think that poor people should be ashamed to advocate for other low-income people. But in fairness, I'm happy to withdraw the motion if somebody else would like to make the motion and recuse myself. I don't know that I will qualify for the grant moving forward. But I do know that my role is to advocate for what benefits the broader community. And as elected officials, we often advocate for services we ourselves use, whether parks, public safety, or childcare. I'm speaking on that because nobody else was, and it's important to me, not just as somebody as a recipient, but as a young parent and a family that has a lot of friends that have families and need this. And I have no apologies about it, but if it makes everybody comfortable, I'm happy to withdraw and somebody else can make the motion.
Fair enough. I think that makes sense in this case to withdraw that motion. Mayor?
Yes, I move that the Budget Committee direct staff to return next week with options for a $240,000 early learning line item in the budget, and to give us at least a couple of options about how that might be funded.
Second.
Somebody got to call a question. I mean, theoretically, we can.
I've said all I need to. I really am just looking for some creative ways of continuing to operate in this space, given the uncertainty that people are talking about, that we know our young people are facing. One of the things that we know is that the toddlers and the preschoolers are the pipeline of children into our school district. We know our school district is struggling. We know we have goals around a broader diversity of ages in this community, and so I want to see what our options might be.
Gina, do you have anything to add?
Ditto.
Perfect. I mean, I will be supporting this this motion as well. But does anybody have any other discussion? All right, let's put it to a vote. I don't necessarily.
I do the roll call. Ready?
Okay.
Okay. Chair Hunter?
Yes.
Mayor Graham?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Roy?
Yes.
Duquesne?
Yes.
Murray? Bloom? Are you, okay, my apologies. Dale?
Yes.
Spiegler?
Yes.
Wade?
Yes.
Kaplan.
Kaplan, thank you.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Yes, Eric.
Chair, I'd like to put a motion forward, please.
Is it? I just want to make sure that it's something that we're going to need staff to come back with next week with potential updates or modifications or something.
I believe we're going to want to put it forward and look at it next week. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to put forward the Citizen Budget Committee recommend a parks fee of $6.50 as the recommendation from the commissioners to make parks whole.
So if I may, just point of order,
we have
is
it?
that a policy decision? I need a ruling on that.
So we might want to consider tabling that until after the joint session tonight, because I think we're probably going to get direction from the policy bodies to bring that back anyways at the third meeting.
I'm sorry, it was my understanding that the Citizen Budget Committee could recommend that. I don't see any harm in it. But also, hey, I'm just one CBC member here, so that's my motion.
Totally right. And I think the motion that would be totally acceptable is that we, as a body, add 1.4 million, because that's what it sounded like, to the park's resources, and have you figure out how to do that.
And if I may, Chair, Councilor Henson, that was my point, is that if there's a motion to be made here relative to the CBC, it would be something like X amount of funds being reallocated to X amount of place. It's not necessarily a policy around whether it would be a council decision ultimately
I
relative
appreciate
to a
that.
fee. Thank you.
I appreciate that. That's very good clarification. So I would like to withdraw my motion. I would like to make another motion that the Citizen Budget Committee recommend that we add $1.4 million in revenue towards the parks budget.
Do we have a second?
I second.
I think it's just increase the parks budget by, it's not really revenue. Well, is it revenue? No, we're just increasing the budget. It's just increasing the budget by $1.4 million.
Sure. Right, the resources.
I am fumbling through this, so I appreciate you workshopping this with me. I withdraw that motion. I would like to put a motion forward that the Citizen Budget Committee add $1.4 million to the parks budget.
Parks Department. Second.
Any discussion?
We've spoke a lot about this, and in the interest of time, I'll just say thank you.
Okay. And anything that you want to add, Bob?
No, I think it's appropriate. I just want to say that I think it's appropriate that this committee make that recommendation. I think ultimately the decision is a policy decision that would be taken up by the council together with the Parks Commission. But I think it would be a helpful step for this committee to make the recommendation so that the respective policy bodies can then figure out whether they want to endorse that and how.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do, and I understand it. Personally, I feel I can't support it this time because we're 30 minutes away from having that discussion in depth, and I would like more information relative to that, because I think if that's really what I need to hear from, is I need to hear from Parks Director, I need to hear from the commission, I need to understand it more before I can support it. So it's not a matter of saying, no, I don't want to do it. I'm just saying I need more information, and I knew I was going to get that later tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same position. I struggle with it because I don't know the impact it's going to have on each citizen. Like, is it going to be a $6.50 increase to the community members, or is it going to be the parks cut something else in their budget to get to that 1.4? I don't know. So I'm struggling with the process at this point.
Brianna?
I agree. I am struggling with the process as well. It's not that I don't want to make parks whole, it's that I want more information, and I feel like we're still kind of in the midst of getting that information, and more will come in 29 minutes.
Mayor?
I would like to offer an amendment. And I'm a little out of practice. I would like to amend the motion to direct staff, depending on the outcome of the council and Parks Commission study session, to bring back to this body options for closing the gap of the $1.4 million in the Parks Department.
I second.
So what this would do is that if the council this evening provides direction to the staff to move forward with a fee, then that would automatically handle the issue. If that is not the direction that comes from the council this evening, then what this body would be saying is, we want to see if there's any other possible way to close some of that, some or all of that $1.4 million gap.
So I mean, you can absolutely speak to your second on the amendment.
I think it's clear that we need that information, and I also support the fee. So let's find out what can happen.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Anything? Okay. I guess we can vote on the amendment to the original motion.
Chair Hunter,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Roy,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Murray, Duquesne,
No.
Spiegler,
Yes.
Bloom,
No.
Dale,
No.
Wade.
Am I allowed to ask a question of clarification at this moment? No?
Yeah.
I'm going to say no then, because obviously I have some questions.
Motion passes.
Were there?
Right?
Did we get
Did I do
everybody?
it? Oh, did I miss? I'm not a good roll caller. Sorry.
I think you have to now go to the original motion.
Oh, for the original motion? Okay.
Right. What's that?
No, this is for the original motion.
With the amendment. So it's,
Yeah, that was just the amendment.
That was just the amendment.
That was-
Right. That was the amendment. So now for the full motion. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Chair Hunter,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Duquesne,
No.
Roy,
Yes.
Bloom,
No.
Murray, Dale,
No.
Spiegler,
Yes.
Wade,
No.
Kaplan.
Kaplan.
Yes.
I love you, Bob.
Okay.
That's impressive.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Was
Yeah,
it-
I said yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right. Thank you. We are coming in on time. I want to take the temperature on everybody's feeling about next session being able to pass the budget.
My sense, I'm curious what everybody else thinks, but I think that we should add that extra budget session. We kind of ran right up against time. There was two motions made. I'm sure others maybe have considerations, more questions. We need to see what the options are. Then we plug in those options, then adjustments need to be made. I think just to be safe, to do this right, we do one extra session.
I agree. 100%.
Sure. Yeah. It does. Yeah. It sounds like there's general agreement to have that fourth meeting.
We will notice it.
I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but
May 21st.
May 21st. Okay. Okay. Perfect.
So
Right. Right.
I won't be able to attend that meeting.
We can
Is
make
there
it Zoom.
Any ability? Can we make it Zoom?
If you can do Zoom, we can make it
Yes.
Zoom.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Nothing else for this evening.
Thank you.
Let's adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
So,
Sorry, we went a little over everybody.
in the process here, because I feel like
I was going to add time. I was going to
I
add
generally
time.
had motions, and I have